Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, let's talk about how to override or how to reduce that fear of commitment with an avoidant partner. And I've worked with many, many avoidants, and this is usually something that occurs or needs to occur before an avoidant commits, okay? So let's talk about commitment with an avoidant. Are avoidants actually afraid of the concept of commitment? Yes and no. If you ask an avoidant, are you afraid of commitment? Some of them will be like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with it. Some of them will say, I'm not afraid of commitment. I just don't want to, right? And so that difference is really important to understand, because when someone thinks of the word afraid, they think it's presented in like a very rigid way, right? How do I even explain it? It's not fear like, okay, there's a gator outside, let me call animal control. Not really. Sometimes avoidance might actually feel that feeling a little bit, but typically it's like you're afraid of something, so you're very rigid. So an example is if someone is like socially anxious, right? Social anxiety. They're not like terrified of the social situation. Some people are, but some people, what they do is they actually just build their life around that so they don't have to socialize. Another example is agoraphobia. Let's say, they don't want to go outside they're afraid to like lose a family member, or they're afraid of something like that. It can happen if, like, let's say one time you left your house and then your grandmother passed away, right? So that's part of the development of it, among other things, right? And so you're afraid to leave because you don't want something bad to happen. You associate that. Social anxiety is like you associate humiliation or discomfort, whereas agoraphobia, it's not socializing, but it's leaving a certain particular area or going to a certain place where you feel like something negative is going to happen, right? And these behaviors are not, oh, I'm feeling so afraid, I'm terrified, I'm shivering in my bedroom, I need to hide under the blankets type of deal. No, it's usually like they live a very rigid lifestyle to avoid it. And that is very similar to avoidance. They live a very rigid lifestyle to avoid commitment. They almost have no room for relationships. They're always busy. They're doing 5 or 6 different things. They have a very small window where they can do anything. They avoid people sometimes, not because they're uncomfortable with talking in front of people unless they have a conjunction of issues, which is okay, right? But particularly about the attachment issue, it's just that they live a lifestyle that doesn't have room for commitment, so they can say, hey, I'm too busy, or I don't have time for committing, or my life is not in that way. And so they're rigid against their fear of commitment, and that's the maladaptive aspect. So yes, it is fear, but the root of that is fear of losing control, uncertainty, not being accepted, and fear of failure. So when you say, are you afraid of commitment, sometimes it doesn't register. And so usually the way to manage around it is that they want to know they are safe. And that's the main aspect. And we're going to talk about how to make them feel safe, but that's what it is. How to override that fear is to make them feel safe and accepted. Truly, that's really it. Now, it's simple to say, not simple in practice. And I'm going to give an example. If someone is afraid of heights, they're not actually afraid of the height itself, right? They're not afraid of, like, if they look at a building, they're terrified it's going to come and beat them up. No, right? They're afraid that if they are on that height, that they will fall and hurt themselves. They're afraid of getting hurt, right? And so sometimes managing that is, if you're in an apartment building, like the city, like an hour north from where I am, there's like really tall buildings, right? The people at the top floor are not shivering in their bed thinking, okay, I'm so afraid. But if they didn't have walls around that house, yes, they would probably feel afraid, because what makes them feel less afraid is if there's safety measures, right? And so if they feel like they're safe at that height, the height is not necessarily going to scare them. It's the same thing. If they feel like there's safety in the relationship and you're not going to hurt them, you're not going to call them a failure, you're not going to make them feel uncertain too much, right? You're not going to take over their entire life. They're not going to be afraid of commitment anymore, right? So they just don't want to lose their space, autonomy, their perceived identity, and they don't want to be humiliated. They don't want to be controlled, and they don't want to feel like they're making the wrong decision. So let's talk about how to do that now that we went over the details of what that looks like so that you are aware. The first one is you provide built-in space in the lifestyle. Means having separate activities. Not all activities have to be separate, but some of them. You have separate friends. You allow time for decompression when needed. The next one is you reassure them of their fears. This is different than the way anxious folks need reassurance. It's not, I'm here for you, I'm never going to leave you, even though that can help. It's more like, I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm just asking, I promise. If you don't end up, meeting me at this time, that's okay. We can reschedule. I'm not going to get mad. Or I'm not going to suddenly ask for marriage just because we moved in together. I hope that you can trust me and appreciate me for who I am as I appreciate you for who you are. Those are examples that are reassuring their fears, okay? The next one is acknowledging their efforts. I really appreciate that you put in effort for our relationship. I really appreciate that you want to change. I really appreciate that you have changed, etc. The next one is you want to address, actually when you're addressing commitment is a better way to put it. You want to reinforce your trustworthiness, okay? You can say you can say something like, actually, let's give an example. Let's say you and your significant other want to move in together, or that's the conversation you guys are having. And they're saying, I don't know if we should move in together because I've never lived with anybody. I really like my space and I don't want us to always be fighting all the time. And I'm afraid of that, or something like that. Maybe they won't say afraid. I'm just not ready for that. And you can say, I appreciate you sharing and being honest. I do want to let you know that I've thought about that as well. I also don't want you to lose those things, and I don't want to lose those things either. But I think it's important that I want to make it a point to give you space in general. I want to make it a point to not pick fights as much. And I want to reassure you that I don't feel like that's going to happen. And I hope that you can trust that. I know it's not easy to trust those things, and we can revisit this topic later, but I do want you to see that I've been making improvement in general. And so I hope that that's not going to come into that space. Something of that sort, communicate as you please. But you want to reinforce your trustworthiness. I'm working on this. This is something I want to do. This is the way I want to be, etc. It really helps them. The next one is when they say maybe or I'm not sure, address it directly and mention that they have a non-committal response. I know this is going to sound strange because a lot of you guys are thinking, oh, I have to be gentle and soft with them. Well, you have to be balanced, right? If they're saying a non-committal response, you can mention, I think that, that's non-committal. You don't really know what to say. And I would like a more direct response. I understand if you don't have that answer right now, but I want you to get to a point where you can be more committal with responding. Something like yes, or we can talk about that at this time, or I'm looking into that. Something a little bit more committal than I'm not sure or maybe. And you can say, let's revisit that when you feel more comfortable with that, but that's what I'm expecting. The next one is you want to speak how you feel without expecting immediate change. What we just spoke about is a really good example. I don't appreciate you having a non-committal response. I understand that's the way you are at this point, and I can appreciate meeting you halfway as well. But I'm hoping that at some point we can get more comfortable with both of us giving more committal responses, okay? The next one is you want to be non-judgmental in general. I understand that you're uncomfortable with certain things, and I'm not judging you for that. I'm uncomfortable with certain things as well. I just want us to compromise and meet in the middle, okay? That's it. Then the next one is acknowledge your mistakes in the relationship and outwardly express your commitment to change. I understand sometimes I can be very overwhelming, and I want to get better about that. Let me know if you see an improvement because I'm working on that as well. The next one is something to keep in mind. You do typically need to expect a slower than secure timeline. If secure folks get married in like 2 or 3 years, you're going to get married in 5, 6, 7 years. It's just true. And I think it's important to recognize that. Not all the time is that the case, but it is more important. And the last one is you want to respect your partner. Respect is different depending on each partner. You can ask them. But let's go ahead and summarize and we'll wrap it up. You want to provide space that's built into the relationship. You want to reassure them of their fears, not your fears. Acknowledge their efforts when addressing commitment. You want to reinforce your trustworthiness. You want to make sure that it sounds like you are a person that also is willing to adjust or meet them halfway is kind of the way to put it. When they give you a non-committal response, you want to address that and expect some change. You want to speak how you feel without expecting immediate change, but change in the future. You want to be non-judgmental in general, not even with them, but in general. You want to acknowledge your mistakes and also outwardly express verbally that you want to change. Expect a slower timeline for commitment and then respect your partner. I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.